you do compensate them, what should that compensation be, what should it look like? No, there's nothing to do with liability or in the courses, and it's a set. Normally I'm not a big fan of study committees, but it's a pretty big topic, and I think I mean, speaking kind of off the back of my wrist here, it could be a decent amount of money. So I think it's important to have a study committee just to be able to determine, but that's just.
Yeah, another question here, go ahead.
Yeah, so
Oh, you can
it's
start.
an appropriation of $250,000
Same question.
to hire a consultant. That seems excessive.
So that was my first thought, and I asked the director, which is actually our thought. And he assured me that that was the number that A&R gave him.
Of course.
Now, I'm not in love with that number either, but after speaking with him, I thought that number would be, okay to leave in there and let that be hashed out in committee, as well as getting testimony from A&R to see why they want that number. Considering, at least in my opinion, they already have a really nice committee here full of a lot of different, stakeholders. I don't think, do they need consultants when they already have all those people, but, perhaps, having them in there does give them some sort of flexibility if they so need it, hopefully they don't, or. But I had the same question, and I also highlighted that.
It's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, great, well, thank you so much. And
Well, Mike is double booked,
oh no, okay,
so
okay,
your guess is as good as mine, whether he will be here.
okay, but, and are we still so, thank you.
He hasn't,
I believe it.
he hasn't said we won't, but he hasn't said
And-
he will.
Are we anticipating this going?
Yeah, she's upstairs.
Okay. All right, well, so we could take a 5-minute break because we're anticipating that we'll have Okay. Right, so we're coming back from a break and do a walkthrough of S79, your legislative council, welcome.
Good morning. Speaker Grady Legislative Council. S79 is an acclimating to establishing the Recreational Trails Compensation Study Committee. It is created to review whether the real property owners who allow use of their property for public recreational trails should receive compensation rather than benefit. The membership is pretty vigorous. It's the Commissioner of Parks and Parks or designee, Commissioner of Taxes, the designee, representative of the Trails and Greenways Council, which is a kind of a body corporate that helps implement the Vermont Trail System. There's VOREC, which is a collaborative at the department, well, it was formed by the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation to foster and support outdoor recreational interests in the state. Would be a representative of a land conservation organization, a private landowner plus a conservation easement that includes recreation. A private landowner who doesn't have a conservation easement and currently provides public access. A representative who has expertise in trail planning, design, maintenance, etc. And then representative of the. On page 3, you'll see that they are allowed to invite other participants, lines 3 and 4. And then their powers and duties are to review how private property currently is made available for use by public recreational trails, summarize the costs and liabilities that owners incur when private property is used for trails, assess available economic data, and other relevant available data or analysis and conduct further necessary economic analysis to determine the value that recreational trail access provides to the state and local economies, investigate whether or not property owners are compensated for allowing trails on their property, recommend to the General Assembly whether real property owners who allow their property for public recreational trails should receive compensation or other benefit. And page 4, how to ensure trail study, design, construction, and management meet minimum standards and how to ensure that new trail development is established based on the merit of the opportunity being created in comparison to any incentive provided to a private landowner. So it gets assistance from the Department of Parks and Recreation and reports back to you with its findings by December 15, 2026. The Commissioner calls the first meeting by September 15, 2025. Commissioner is the chair. Non-state members will be entitled to per diem and expenses. And this is what I don't particularly understand, student appropriation, is that the department asked for $250,000 to be appropriated in FY 2026 to contract with one more consultants to assist with the required evaluation of the economic impact of the outdoor recreation industry on the economy of Vermont. I thought that had already been done. I thought that had been done by VOREC. They've been.
I know.
Yes. And that is really good.
Any questions? No, okay, super, thank you so much. Okay. So we'll take some more testimony on this and one potential path for it is see if we want to attach it to the miscellaneous A&R bill. We'll see if this is something that we want to move forward. Or see if some other version of it comes over, but I don't know. So thank you so much and yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I also want to find out about the suggestion. Health was made the Snre number.
Yeah.
At the bottom of that.
Yeah, we need
At
to,
the bottom of why that number.
yeah, I agree. So we should have VOREC in, we'll have A&R in, we'll see if we can get more information about her. Okay, all right, so now we're gonna switch gears and welcome. Who's coming up from Beck? Shimon Electric Co-op. To talk about community solar.
I am getting in Zoom, doing this. There we go.
Should be all set to share.
All right, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, I'm Andrea Cohen with Vermont Electric Cooperative, and I'm here to discuss community solar. And I did hear some of your conversations. I know there's a lot of interest, a lot of questions, a lot of ideas. And in the context of a successor program for net metering. We have a long history with all this, so I'll just, as much as you like, you know, kind of download and share, and happy to come back or follow up. I do have some slides, which I will. Don't need my email. Slides, can you see those?
Yes.
Great.
Very pretty.
Thank you, I tried. Slideshow. It's always dangerous to just share your screen and you don't know what's on my desktop is a little embarrassing, so it's kind of like.
We all know how that goes.
Yeah. Okay, here we are, so, we've been in this committee, but, we kind of were jumping right into the other bill, so, I'll just give you a few slides and some background so you know the context of who we are, what we do, and why we're in this space. Vermont Electric Cooperative, that gray part of the map you see up there, we cover a lot of the northern part of the state. Champlain Islands, up to the Canadian border to Franklin County, Lamoille County. Some Essex, Orleans, all the way over to the east side of the state, so that gray is VEC towns. And that kind of insert, VEC has districts and we have a board of directors, and so that's the VEC board of directors in the districts. A lot of background for you, you can look as you like, but we've been around since 1938. We are a member-owned cooperative nonprofit distribution utility. The reason we existed was the farmers were not getting power and got together like many cooperative, you know, starts because they weren't being served. And you can see some of the, we have some amazing photos in our archives, but I just shared these two of back in the early days when they first turned the switch. And Senator Westman will often tell the story about his grandmother talking about waiting for the power to get turned on with her new washer dryer, you know, her electric washer dryer. So it's been a long time, but not really. There's still people who remember not having service, but those days, those folks are, we're trying to document some of their stories. But we have about 33,000 members. We're the second largest utility in the state. People don't realize that. We have a democratically elected board of directors, and we're very accountable to our members. I'll talk a little bit more, but we have great, you know, performance and member satisfaction. Every year we do an annual member survey, and this is shocking to some people. I have to move so I can see things here.
15%.
Look at our membership, 65 and older, more than 50% of our members are older. And as you see the past few years, it's even increasing the elderly. So people are not necessarily moving to these parts of the state, people are moving away, young people. So this is always first and foremost on our mind. When we come here and we're talking about any program or policy, we have these people in mind who are really struggling on fixed incomes to pay their light bill, and they still refer to it as the light bill.
Really?
Yeah, it's the light bill. And then trying to advance, there we go. You might have heard from Efficiency Vermont, they do what's called an energy burden report. It's an excellent piece of work. We refer to it a lot. This is just one little image from it. But they chart, you know, who has the highest energy burden, and that's both numerator and denominator, how much money you have and how much you have to pay for your energy, right? So either of those changes, it changes the formula. But as you can see, those red towns are the towns with the highest energy burden, and 7 of the top 11 with the highest energy burden are VEC towns. This is not something, you know, if we keep in mind, but it's tough.
So before you go on, just out
Yeah.
of curiosity. Like, why is? If nobody else around Paulette has that high end, or why does Paulette have such a high end, just by way of example?
Yeah, I
Or
don't
you can pick a
know,
different town, come
yeah, any town, income
Yeah.
and
So
cost,
just, so, okay.
income
not
really
cost-
drives a lot of
Yeah,
that.
okay, so it's not cost of electricity, it's income.
Right, like their neighbor town would have the same cost of electricity, so the
Okay.
difference will be
Got it.
there is just the income.
Okay, got it.
And if you haven't had Efficiency Vermont in on this report, you might want to, it's really, really interesting and helpful. Like I said, we do our annual member survey and we ask a lot of questions. It really helps us with our policy work, it helps us with our program work. And I just grabbed one of the slides, just to share in terms of when we ask our members, what do they care about in terms of our power supply decisions that we make? We ask, what matters to you? Cost, renewability, carbon, in-state, out-of-state, all these things. So you can see for this is just the past 4 years, low cost energy is the most important thing. Not surprising, given the energy burden. But also, it's not to say that they don't care about renewability and carbon free, but when we force a ranking, when we force them to say, what's the most important? It's the cost of power right now. And has been for the past 4 years that we've asked this question. So as we think about our priorities, we gotta keep the lights on. You can get folks to transition to driving electric or heating electric, but if we can't keep the power on, we're not doing our end of that bargain, right? So we gotta keep the lights on, we gotta do it affordably, and we have to, our board is committed to reducing carbon out of everything else that we prioritize. So these are the 3 legs of the stool. They don't necessarily conflict, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, right? From doing your work that these are all important, and how do we do it? Again, our board is a bunch of years ago, committed to, before the res bill changes last year and whatnot, our board had committed to being 100% carbon free by 2023 and being 100% renewable by 2030, and that was a commitment outside of the legislative requirements, but it did feed into our work on the res bill last year. So community solar, just that was a little background to talk about. VEC has been doing co-op community solar since 2016. So we're almost, we're pushing up against 10 years of experience doing community solar. We were committed for this to be something that was not about making money, not about developers making money, not about cost, like really in a way that's cost effective without a cost shift. So how do we create a program? So our smart people got together and they created this program, and I'll dive in a little bit, but to speak about the benefits, it's cost effective because it's competitively bid. It's not a must pay, it's competitively bid and it's negotiated. Our power supply folks work with developers. We don't own any of these. We work with private sector partners on all of this. And we ensure we got a competitive price, well-priced solar. And that way it brings direct value with no cost shift. That was very important to our board of directors, not cost shifting to other people who might not be participating.
Can I just stop for a
Yes.
second? You said a phrase, I wanna make sure, you said cost effective without a cost shift, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay,
So it's both of those things, right?
I liked that phrase, I wrote it down and I wanted to make sure I got it right.
By going competitive PPA, we went out there, we said, who's got a project? Who has the best price? So we're making sure it's a market-based price. And that allows us to not, we're gonna buy energy cost effective way. What well cited, another thing we like about our program is we have control about where it goes. There's not all solar is equal in terms of value to the grid and value to our membership and value to the system. General principle is close to load, so you don't have to push it far away. You'll see that our projects are on the western side of the state because that's where most of our load is. So with these projects, we get to control. We work with developers who say, we don't want them here, we want them there, where's the right smart place? No, we're not interested in it being in the SHI. I don't know if you've heard that term. It's a constrained part of our system where we have more generation than demand. It's that eastern part of the state. It's the kingdom where we don't have a lot of demand for electricity, but we have a lot of projects in and there's some constraints with the system, so we get to decide where they go, that's really important. Local renewable energy, of course, you know, we retire the racks, we make sure that these projects help us towards our renewable energy standard requirements. What we love about this too is inclusive, people don't need to have a good solar site at their house for them to participate, they don't need to own their home. Because what was happening was it was only homeowners that were having solar, not renters, and some folks just don't want solar on their roof or in their yard, and they don't wanna make that kind of commitment. They might not be staying there forever, whatever. So we knew there was a bunch of community, you know, a bunch of folks who would love to support going renewable, but like the net metering on the roof was not what made sense to them. We also set it up in a way that there's an exit option at any time. If you're like, nope, I don't really wanna do this anymore, I need the cash, or I'm moving, or there's an exit option where you get the pro rata share back. So it's pretty low risk that way, and it's affordable, kinda, we'll talk more about affordability. We'll talk a lot more about affordability, but we did set up like a very low, you have to come up with money up front, like a CSA, like a farm CSA. So we had finance partners, and I'll talk some more about that as we go on, but it was designed so that it is important that anybody can participate. So the current status, we have 3 projects that are about over 7 megawatts at really well-sited locations. One's in Alberg, one's in Grand Isle, one's in Heinsberg. These aren't our only solar projects, these are the ones that are just for the co-op community solar. And the sponsorship started in 2018, and to date, 27% of all the panels have been sponsored. Meaning we have more capacity, and I'll talk about our future plans.
Question, so interesting that you have one in Heinsberg, that is not like Grand Isle, Franklin county area, so does it matter that it's outside of your?
Oh, no, we have Heinsberg is in our service.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have Heinsberg, we joke with GMP, they got Main Street, we got Mountain View.
Got you.
Right, so,
Okay.
so we've got rural, we got a lot of Heinsberg actually.
Okay,
But in the rural parts.
Right,
Yeah, not the downtown.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm.
Heinsberg is a important member, you'll see when I go back to some of the findings, what, it'll come back to Chittenden County versus other parts of the
And
state.
sorry, before you go to,
Yeah.
Sarah, did you have a question?
That was my question.
Okay, all right.
We actually have a little bit of Starksboro, cause this month they touched them. Yeah. So I'll just show you, Encore Renewable is our partner for 2 of the projects, and they take great photos with their drones, so I just love showing the arrays, because so this is the one in Alberg, it's about 1 megawatt. This is the Heinsberg one, 1.3 megawatts, and you see the funny shape there? That's because the landowner had a little maple operation right there that goes back many generations, was like, you can't cut those trees down. So that little cutout is just to keep sugar in right there. Encore is great about working with the landowner to make it work and the neighbors. And then this is the Grand Isle, this one's much bigger, it's 5 megawatts, see it goes. So I'm not gonna dive too deep into this, but our sponsorship scenario, what you have to pay, how much credit you get, all that. If you have an option of 10 years or 20 years, this is all approved and vetted by the PUC, so it's not, you know, very transparent, very open, and basically like a farm CSA. You pay up front, you get a monthly bill credit every month over the contract term, which this is the example of the 10-year one. It's not cheap, it's not free, we're buying this power, so. What I was saying before, and I'll show you later, like, you gotta come up with money up front. That's not, low income folks are not necessarily doing this, right? Even though we had a great financing partner. A lot of people don't wanna take on that debt, and they're fine, and nobody has to do this is totally an opt-in scenario, so. If you wanna dig into numbers, we could do that, but I just wanna show you very transparent. And scalable, you can do 1 panel up to your whole electric bill, like we work with the member about what makes sense, and they can change that too. Let me just move on, what does it say at the top? Okay, that's the net meter. So, as you know, there's net metering, renewable energy projects, there's our example of co-op community solar. Why we wanted to do something like co-op community solar, and then some other things we have in the works is. unfortunately, net metering is not hitting our low income and rural communities the same way it is. So this is our service territory. We took the net metering projects in our service territory, we mapped them. We're like, really interesting. How many are in Chittenden County versus Essex or like, not just, just to understand where the uptake is. This is a little out of date. I just got the data as I was sitting here through 2024, so I will update this when I send the slides in. Not that different, but as you see, the islands, 17% of the net metering is going on there. Chittenden County, that's Heinsberg, District 5 at the bottom. That's our Chittenden County district pretty much. 37% of the net metering is happening there. And as you go east, it's now closer to like 3 or 4%. Like I said, I'm gonna update. It's a little less diverse. But still, the majority of the net metering is not happening in Essex or East, right? And we, part of doing community solar and some other things is a way to get renewable energy to the community, to everybody who wants to participate. So this again is just reality without a logic. This is just how net metering is deployed in our service territory. And we think we can do better, right? So I will show you a few other things. So we saw more opportunity. We saw opportunity for energy equity, making sure all income levels are able to participate in the energy future. And we had a few things that we were working on to secure some grant funding and other things. So I'll talk a little bit about those. Acre, you all, with your support in 2021, appropriated $10 million in ARPA dollars to DPS to create this affordable community renewable energy program. The whole goal was to get to income qualified folks. ARPA was geared towards that too. The program DPS developed was somewhat modeled on our community solar program. It was informed by what we had learned with community solar. And VEC, with our partner, we invited WEC, our sister co-op, to join us. We were able to secure a grant for almost $2.7 million to essentially bring community solar to income qualified folks. We love this program. We have helped a lot of people. So just phase one with us and WEC, we had 480 households that were able to, we were able to enroll them in a community solar project. Not the ones we already had, because the terms and things are different. What we ended up using was an old landfill solar project that again, we developed with Encore Renewable, great use of an old landfill. Love the brownfields redevelopment aspects. So we used this project that we negotiated a competitive price for the PPA, and we used the grant money to enroll folks. And what these income qualified folks are getting is $45 a month on a bill credit every month for 60 months, for 5 years. And for some people, that's a good half of their bill, right? And the community action folks that we're working with that helped us, we're partnering, are working with these people to say, you're saving $45 a month, maybe you wanna put some out aside to work on your weather, to work on other upgrades and other, like, $45 a month could be very meaningful to do a lot of good things. So we have completed phase one. We had 2 phases to the grant. Phase one was this landfill. We're fully booked and enrolled. And we're working with DPS now on the second part of the phase 2 grant with a different project and similar kind of terms and things. Good.
I might have missed it in the policy. What do they pay to be a participant?
Nothing.
Okay, the ARPA grant wouldn't pay for that. Okay. So they pay nothing, enroll, and they get $45 a month for 60 months. Okay.
They have to income qualify. We're working with DCF, who is our partner on that. You'll hear us say this on a lot of bills when we're here. We don't want to know people's income. I don't want to hold that data. I don't want to have to ask for it. When we talk about low income rates and programs, you'll hear us come in and say, I don't want to, But they apply through DCF, they do the income qualification, DCF gives us the list, and then we enroll them. We promote it, they apply there, we enroll them. It's been working so well. Now, the hitch here is you need to have grant money. right?
Yeah, it helps.
That's the thing, so you'll hear in my closing remarks some things about the money side of this, but it's really helping a lot of people and it's great. This chart I pulled together and I'll update with, there's a little tweak to the net metering once, but if you compare net metering to BEC's regular community solar, our CSA solar, to the acre program. In terms of the distribution, like who's participating, what, remember I talked about net metering is not happening on the eastern part of the state. Our districts, this goes east to west, basically, District 1 is Orleans, you know. District 2 is Newport, kind of moving that way. So this we've just pulled together because we wanted to get a sense, so net metering is really big in District 5, that's the Chittenden County, it's big in District 7. That's the blue bars, that's the island. VEC's community solar, a little more better distribution, you know, like we have districts 1 and 2, you know, little, like, so it's kind of a little more equitably distributed. But still not where we wanna be, so a lot in just in District 5, right, Mona? If you look at the acre program, the income qualified program, District 2 and 3 have the most. So we're really getting the people that are not doing the net metering or not doing the community solar, so. In a sense, the suite is really nice, because we kind of have something for everybody that way. So it's very interesting to think about.
So just to clarify, so on this chart, the BC Community Solar, that is the one that is the CSA model, pay up front. It's probably not, had a lot, doesn't have a lot of participation from lower income folks, but we see that more in the acre.
Well, more than that, if you look at the blue and the orange, like in District 1,
Mhm.
right? The CSA model has more uptake,
Right,
but not, you know.
yeah,
So it seems to progress, right? Like when it comes to income qualified folks, it seems like acre of course is the best, then the community solar, then the net metering, right now. And again, I do have to update this because it's net metering, I just got some new data as I was sitting here and it's a little less extreme in terms of the difference, still the same difference.
go ahead.
Do you have any storage capacity?
Mhm.
You do.
Yeah, we have 2 community scale storage, one is just us in actually in Heinsberg. And we also have a project in North Troy that's in partnership with Green Mountain Power that just started being fully operating. Heinsberg, we've had a few years now. And then we have residential programs for like.
Great, any other questions? Oh, yeah,
I'm curious, use that, the storage to take off peaks.
Yeah, that's our biggest challenge right now is really managing peaks and managing load and. That's the future, we have some very smart people, but again, like storage projects, they're really expensive, like the North Troy one. It worked for Heinsberg, we made that pencil out, North Troy, we had a DOE grant, partner. Sandia Labs was part, like, that's how that, like, it's not yet. Cost effective for us to really do a lot of large scale solar, storage.
So I did know, it's just incidentally, that your community solar actually has a relatively fast payback compared to what we, my wife and I did. We got a longer payback than, which is, yours payback is supposed to be about 8 years.
Yeah,
So
it's very interesting, like, people say, should I invest in the community solar versus putting money in the stock market? I'm like, this is not an investment, we cannot call this FTC or whatever, we're not like us, but. If
Well,
you
that's how you have to look at it.
But you have to look at it, because that money's, if you have money, and it's sitting here, is it better to do this? And look at that rate sheet, if you're into numbers and
I think you paid it off in about 8 years when you're about.
you come up net positive, right? Like you see that last column, talks about, the profit, the total savings, we call it.
That's
It's way better, yeah.
Like, again, the more you put in, but you come back, you're making money in a sense. If you have money, but that's why we did a finance partner too, because we said the finance partner was able to finance for people, and on a monthly basis, you were still coming out ahead. Even with the finance cost. not a lot, but you could still participate in a way that was cost effective for you.
Immediately,
Yeah,
yeah, that's remarkable.
Yeah, that was my, yeah.
yeah, we're almost 10 years into this, so we need to look at it again and brush it off and say, you know, are we gonna offer that? Some folks' terms are coming up, they've been in it almost 10 years, so we have to see what we're doing going forward. So Acre, and just on Acre, we have phase 200 for development. So overall comments, we've learned a lot. To be sustainable and fair, it really needs to be market-based when we're buying the power. The kind of must pay at whatever price that somebody says somewhere, it doesn't allow us to negotiate, it doesn't allow us to be smart about the procurement, so. I think that's a good model for community solar, making sure it's market-based when you procure the power. Cause why do you wanna pay more than you need to when there's so much other important work to get done? Like, we'd rather spend that money on carbon reduction and other things, right? The cost shift conversation, I know is really important, even like, no matter where you put the line. For an income qualified program. Someone's just over that line, you know, we have a lot of people that don't qualify, say for Acre. You know, I'm really glad that we can say we're not using other co-op dollars to subsidize this, because. I don't want their bill going up because we're trying to do something to help the income qualified folks, because they don't qualify. And so as you're doing program design or thinking about what's next for community solar, like try, you know, just know there's always somebody, like try not to cost shift on that. There's folks that want to engage with renewable energy and that's great, but it shouldn't cost their neighbor more. Because they want to do that. And then the siting part matters. Utilities really know a lot about where there are good sites and not good sites, and not like we have to control everything, but. Like, there should be some way for the utility to say, please no, that is a really bad place to put that project, and. We often in the regulatory process, you know, sometimes we have to intervene, or it'd be nice to be able to just do things proactively and partner up on that and not have to go all regulatory legal. To fight projects that were just poorly cited, so,
Yeah,
Do you have you identified sites and developers know where those sites are?
yeah, well, not like this parcel kind of thing, but what often happens, we have a map. GMP is a sophisticated one that's a little more interactive, but we also have a map on our website, and we have red, green, yellow. And we're like, red's not a good place to put projects, you know, because of those constraints, and yeah, so that's, and when we're going, we go out to bid for our own. Work, and we'll let developers know, you know, we're not interested in projects here or here, because what often happens is the projects happen where land is cheap. And that's kind of why we've gotten to where we are in the kingdom also, like, because people are like, hey, I got a farm, I'm not far, you know. And it's a great place for you to do your project, but it's not from a grid perspective or necessarily a great place, but it might be a cheap place to buy or lease the land, so. That is not always consistent with efficiency from the grid perspective, where land's cheap is not necessarily the best place. That's the trend that has happened. We get calls all the time from folks saying, I got a great site, and it's like. Not really for us, but call the developers, see if, you know, they want to explore that. So we talked about that, and then transparency is just something I want to emphasize. The utilities are so highly regulated that like everything we do, which is great, really, you know, everything we do is very open, transparent. In some parts of the sector, it's not so much, like in terms of how much cost profit for a project, we don't often know. Right, so, and maybe we don't need to know, but if the state's gonna put emphasis on things, you know, I think transparency and openness is important, because the whole point isn't for a lot of people to make a lot of money, it's to, you know, do carbon reduction work and support people, so that we think is important. So, and I think, yeah, that was it, you have my contact, and as you dig in, we're happy to talk some more.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. One is, do you happen to know where the money for the Acre program comes from?
It was ARPA.
Those are. And other question is, kind of coming back to Senator Hardy's question from the beginning about, you know, that, what was that phrase? It was, it was cost effective, but not cost shifting. And so I wanna make sure that I can articulate anyway, the reason why this program is not cost shift. I understand that if it's competitively bid, then it's gonna be cost effective. And so if it's not cost shifting, because net metering is sort of a cost shifting program, as I understand it. And this is the,
If we're overpaying for the power, then, you know, if it's, yeah.
yeah, right, like if the price is fixed and you're sort of, you're obligated to pay whoever owns the system, a certain rate, then that might shift the cost to other people who don't have such a system. But this, because, so I'm
Yeah,
saying,
no,
make
no,
sure that I
yeah.
understand, that, so if for the community solar program, where people are buying in, the price that they're getting has been negotiated, and so it doesn't end up burdening other people. That's a fair way to say
It's
it?
a market base, you know, we're buying the power in a competitive market based way, and then to participate, we're making it work. Like that term sheet you saw ensured there was no cost shift.
Right.
The community solar, I forgot to mention, we just are about, I think the money's gonna come through. We worked with NVDA on a grant application to secure some money for income qualified folks to participate in our community solar, not in the acre, but so instead of the person coming up with the money to buy the shares, that the grant would cover that, and then they would just cover the enrollment costs for other folks to put. And we're really excited about that too, because again, there's not a cost shift there, but all this requires outside money, coming in, that's the thing.
Right,
So there's no perfect way.
right, okay. Well, that's good to know though, I mean, just how to make it work.
Right.
Okay, any other questions? Great, okay, super, all right, thank you, and I.
If Nick, wants to zoom in, I told him we're ready for him, but he hasn't
Sure,
for me.
okay, he's
He
here?
hasn't asked to come in.
Okay, well, let's take, sure, yeah, let's take a Sound is on. Okay. Well, and there's no rush if you need a little bit of.
You good to go, let me just, I think I'm in the Zoom,
Okay.
here.
In the suit.
I'm here, it's always a little disorienting when you're like, why am I in both version on it? It's- It is nice being able to tell, can I actually see my screen? I can.
Yes. Very good. You feeling ready?
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. But we're got sound on. Okay, so Natural Resource Center, be coming back from a very short break. We are joined by Nick Vanette from Vermont Mountain Biking Association. Welcome. So good to have you.
Thank you, thank you
Yeah.
for having me, glad to be here, excited to talk a little bit about recreation access recognition. So as you mentioned, I'm the executive director of the Vermont Mountain Bike Association. I also chair the Vermont Trails and Greenways Council, which is an organization we'll be talking about a little bit later, but holistically representative of trail stewardship organizations across the state. So just to sort of level set with a little bit of background, as folks here probably are familiar with, but outdoor recreation is really woven into the fabric of Vermont. We have over 8,000 miles of public access trails across the state. Those trails are maintained through a strong collaboration of private trail stewardship organizations and public land managers like Forest Park and Rec, as well as the Forest Service. Our outdoor business sector is vibrant, highly diversified. The Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance is a good representation of that sector. And many of our communities have really embraced outdoor recreation as vital to their health, their economic vitality. It's also worth noting that public access recognition is a designated purpose for conservation. So in Vermont, you can conserve land with an explicit purpose of public access recreation. And now outdoor recreation, that is now up to 4.8% of Vermont's GDP in terms of accounting for nearly 5% of state GDP in Vermont. And that's up 2% over the previous year. And that's second only in the nation, only behind Hawaii. And that's a state that has volcanoes and beaches and a whole lot of things. So outdoor recreation really vital to Vermont's economic health and certainly our physical and emotional health too. And what we're here to talk about today, and which I'll mention throughout my testimony and keen to chat more about, is the fact that private landowners in Vermont host over 70% of our public access trails. So public access recreation is heavily reliant on the generosity of private landowners. So to talk for a minute about the benefits of outdoor recreation, there's really threefold. One is the supporting healthy and resilient communities. So as many of us found out, and if we didn't realize already in the pandemic, having access to the outdoors and ability to recreate outside is really vital to not just our physical health, but our emotional and social health for our kids, for our families, for every sort of piece of society. Outdoor recreation is an important piece of fostering ecological awareness and conservation. As I mentioned, public access recreation is a accepted purpose for conservation in Vermont. And it's really, as we view the vital thread that connects people with the landscape. It's how people enjoy the outdoors, how they access Vermont's natural beauty. It's also quite important to allow equitable access to the outdoors. Things like dispersed recreation where you can just wander into the woods is a fantastic way to enjoy. But if you're a person with a physical disability, that's quite a challenge. So trails and more structured recreation is really important for folks that possess physical impediments to get outside. And another really important piece of outdoor recreation is a structured way to bring folks into the outdoors and for us to minimize ecological impacts. We understand that trails have impacts, both positive and negatives, and formalized or trail-based recreation is a way to do that with minimal economic or environmental impact. And then lastly, outdoor recreation, as I mentioned with the figures before, is really vital to economic development. We have hundreds of outdoor businesses. It brings new residents here. I moved here from Washington State in large part because of the availability of outdoor resources. They're supporting infrastructure that surrounds these trails and resources as well. And now our annual visit trips, I think, is over 15 million. And a lot of those people are coming to Vermont to enjoy the outdoors. But it's worth noting too that really over the past couple of years, I would say about the past decade, outdoor recreation has grown dramatically, not just in Vermont, but across the country. The most recent survey from or reference, but showed that over half, now up to 57% of Americans recreate outdoors in some capacity last year. And that number has grown every year since 2014. So this isn't purely a pandemic bump that saw people get outside when they didn't have other things to do, but we've seen doubling, even tripling of trail usage and other outdoor facility usage increase really through the pandemic and hold steady since that time. So, which is great. A lot more people are getting outside, but we're also seeing that that demand and that usage is putting a lot of strain on the systems that that we have out there, and then noting as well that a lot of that use is occurring on private lands. So to quickly talk about Vermont Trails and Greenways Council. So this is the organization I chair, represents over 30 individual trail stewardship organizations across the state. So not just mountain bikers, but Green Mountain Club, VAST, VASA, motorized, non-motorized, Catamount Trail Association. This is really the organization that collectively represents the voice of trail stewardship in Vermont. We have our organizations collectively represent over 50,000 individual members, log over 100,000 hours of volunteer time when you add up the individual organizations, and we are really responsible for maintaining the lion's share of those public access trails in Vermont. Outdoor recreation supports over 50,000 jobs throughout the state through that broader impact of our work. That's a very cursory estimate. And then what we really are, in this conversation, quite important to is we are really the liaison between private landowners and the trail users. So we're ones who create access agreements and work with landowners to maintain those trails on private land. We also have agreements with the public land managers, so the Forest Service and for FPR to assist and to work together on stewardship on state land. So it's really, trails don't trails a trail in many cases, and so whether it's on state land or private land, our organizations work to really stewardship and to support use for sustainable access to these trails. So to talk about more about stewardship, this is the Natural Resources Committee, and it's really the core of what we do when we talk about trail stewardship. So we really view our mission, and this is speaking on behalf of the council broadly, and also I can speak for my organization, Vermont Mountain Bike Association. It's really to maintain and grow trail infrastructure in a way that is supports responsible use and sustainable use of those trails. So that's a matter of balancing equitable access. We think about how can we ensure that people have access to the outdoors while also understanding areas of ecological sensitivity, responsible use, and really, the reason we're out there is to enjoy the landscape, which also means respecting and ensuring it stays as pristine and valuable as it is. Our organizations apply best management practices. These are published ways that we design, build, maintain, and manage trails across the state. So that's a really vital aspect of our work. Is that this isn't just carve a trail and go out and have fun. This is a matter of how we professionally maintain and steward these resources. We create annual plans. We work with landowners as well as land managers to do those. And many of our organizations are professionally led. So now over the past decade or two, we've really come to our own in terms of having these organizations led by professionals, but also, as I mentioned before, with that 100,000 volunteer hours, we rely heavily on volunteers to do this work as well. So my organization, Vimba, last year we recruited over 26,000 volunteer hours to help maintain trails across the state. We cultivate long-lasting relationships with landowners, and an important point too is that the vast majority of organizations are funded through memberships, grants, and philanthropic support, not public funding. So we're really relying on the users and folks that enjoy trails to help support them. So challenges we face, and we're really going to touch primarily on one today, but there's a lot of issues out there facing trails in Vermont. As I mentioned, as we've ramped up usage of trails, there's significant deferred maintenance that we're working to keep up with. Stewardship remains underfunded. Many of us are really working on shoestring budgets. Organizational capacity is extremely tight. We have a laundry list of things we'd love to do with that capacity. Regulation can often be a challenge. As I mentioned before, demand generally has increased dramatically. We don't have great details on even our understanding of how the outdoor recreation economy works beyond sort of those top line numbers. Climate change, so the picture on the right is from the Waterbury Hill Trails, which are near my home, in the summer of 2023. So we're acutely aware of the challenges climate change is facing us. And then the last one, which is what the bill we're speaking about today touches on, is the fact that the majority reliance on private landowners without any recognition or support.
Question here.
So to your picture there.
Yes.
Is that a Ford site where the bikes actually cross the
That's the
stream?
parking lot area.
Parking lot?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is an S site, that is in the broader floodplain, but that is literally where that's the trail kiosk where you would go to start your journey down the trail.
So how's the interface with the agency of natural resources? And we got professional trail builders, but they also mountain bikes create a lot of erosion. And I know that has to be maintained, so how is it through the Fish and Wildlife Department that they
or the county foresters?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we work, it depends again on the landowner at the time. So anywhere we're on state land, Fairfield Trails are a good example. We work closely with the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation. Everything goes to the recreation specialists, and their district stewardship. So the district stewardship teams come up with annual plans, any projects are proposed to them. And it's very much overseen by the state. On private land, we have, as I mentioned before, these comprehensive best management practices. So we work with the private landowner, understand what they're interested in hosting, and then apply those management practices to the construction, maintenance of trails. We apply tools that the state applies, has created tools like BioFinder and the ANR Atlas to help us understand, at least from a desk work standpoint, areas of ecological sensitivity, wetlands, things we should avoid or be really mindful of. And then any design work begins then with field assessments and ecological assessments of where are those areas. So a lot of thought, trails are expensive to maintain, so a lot of thought goes into where they're sited because we want to make sure they're better placed to people to serve.
Wait, sorry, were you finished?
Just one
Okay.
So under the ANR's conservation design, you have access to that, so know where the wetlands are and,
Yes,
okay.
absolutely. No, that's the fine, that's the bedrock. And fortunately, there are things like wetlands or areas that you want to avoid trail construction to begin with because it's expensive and complicated to maintain. But those tools are where any trail design starts, is absolutely using those tools.
Thank you.
So private landowners, there are lots of different kinds of private landowners. I mean, some of them are just individuals who have woodlands in the back of their house. Some of them are farmers with lots of property.
Mhm.
Some are companies, whether they're logging companies or other companies that own a lot of land. Some of them are nonprofit organizations like the Vermont Land Trust, et cetera. And I don't see in the bill, and I don't see in your slides, any distinction between those two. They're not the same
Sure.
kind of entity.
Yeah.
And I would think they wouldn't necessarily need to be treated the same way.
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't see that in the bill or in anything you've said about how to distinguish between what a private landowner is.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's actually kind of it nicely tees up the bill because part of the motivation for this legislation, we had both landowners and legislators come to us saying, let's put recreation in current use. This is so similar to these other uses, like it should be something that we acknowledge landowners sort of doing something other than development with their land in addition to agriculture or conservation or timber management. And the reaction, our response was, we have a lot of homework to do before we understand what that should look like. Your example is a good one, which is there are many different kinds of private. And the first one in the bill is to evaluate how private lands are currently used for public access trails, different types of landowners, their motivations, what might allow or not allow you to be part of the system. So you're completely right that all private landowners are not created equal, and part of the value of this piece of legislation would be to assess how should we break those up, who should be eligible for any kind of benefits, what might those benefits look like.
Yeah, and I mean, to the point about current use, I mean, there's nothing in the bill also that says current use has a huge impact on our education fund and our education system. And I wouldn't want to add something else that's going to increase property taxes for other people because of private trail use. So I don't see anything in the bill that speaks to that, to sort of prevent sort of just loading on to the burdens of our education fund.
No, that's a great point, and that was part of that's intentional, is that this isn't so current use also values resources and activities that are very much area based. So farming, timber management, trails are different in that they're linear in terms of we're not a acreage of trail. You might have a small piece of land with a vital connector that's providing connection for a community and a ton of economic return. If that's cut off or no longer has access, that can have a much more significant value than a big old stretch of land that just has a few seldom used trails. So part of the bill would work to understand how do we delineate or separate out those different kinds of value. There could be really high value trails, both from a community standpoint, economic standpoint, and others that are low value. So we need a system that probably looks different from current use if we have any kind of a system. And part of the bill too is, and why it's also found in economic assessment, is to understand what is the present value and really the value of risk that this private access is bringing, because you're spot on, it's not a good time to shoulder Vermont or spend the additional expenses. Our concern, and we've seen it, and then I hope you have a chance to hear from folks like Abby Long and Trails, we've seen if private landowners choose to withdraw assets, which they can do, because the best any of us have are written landowner agreements that they can pull out of in a 30 or 60-day notice. If they withdraw access, the economic impact to Burke and other communities will be significant. So there is certainly both a cost for this bill, but also you're totally right. If you come up, if the bill doesn't, the bill works to understand what are the motivations, it doesn't necessarily jump to this has to be.
Yeah, I guess I would just like it explicit, that this will not be something that adds to the burden of education fund, period, explicit.
Yeah, that's a good question for draft A&R, but yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, I mean, it just, I hear you about all the
Mhm.
benefits, and I hear you about wanting to make sure that private landowners have some kind of incentive, financial incentive to keep their land and the trails, but I also think this is absolutely the wrong time to even hint at the possibility of something that will further burden the education fund.
I think that's a great point. I think one other thing I would just note is that if we see due to folks moving in into second homeowners, changes in land ownership, things like that. And part of what this bill would do is if we see significant loss of public access to these trails, I guess the thing that I'm most curious to understand and see is if that results in a significant drop in the tax income coming to Vermont. That also feels like a significant impact on Vermonters.
Making that connection will be extremely difficult for you to make.
Thank you.
Just a-
Yes.
Well, this is all basically proposing the establishment of a study committee, so all that stuff,
Yeah,
all that stuff should be included in the.
I hear you, but I just think it's really important that we don't even hint at the possibility that it's gonna add to the problems of our education fund right now.
Sorry, oh, yes, go ahead, Sean.
I know there's a lot of different trail networks in the state of Vermont, but they're businesses. Do any of the trail networks, do they compensate their landowners? They don't.
No, and we're actually not allowed, so Vermont has, it's one of the things that we've actually,
Yeah.
the outdoor recreation flourish because of our limited landowner liability protections. So a landowner, provided they don't receive any direct financial compensation, which is something this bill would also consider, how could this ensure that we don't violate that law. They're not liable for any injury or property damage to the person or property. So that's one of the main reasons landowners are willing to work with us, is because they know we can come to them with the landowner liability protections and say, well, yes, if there's a trail on your property, somebody gets injured, unless you conducted once in willful misconduct, you're not gonna be sued by the wrong book. So
Are you saying they can't have that protection if they're being
if
compensated?
they're being compensated, now, so that part of the study, to understand what are the limits, what that looks like, so is
Well, we can shoot that.
or is an assess,
Yeah.
you know, is there, again, Bill's not jumping to the conclusion of what is the outcome, but if there's a assessed value reduction, is that compensation, how does that, that's a vital thing to consider, because we don't want to.
Do you have,
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
do you have statistics about people, how many people are pulling out of the trails right now? I mean, how much of a problem is this, or is it just a potential problem?
We have, it's still anecdotal, so we have stories, and again, if you hear from either Angus McCusker, who works, who's runs his Ridgeline out, collected in Randolph, Rochester, Happy Long Trails, who's had landowners withdraw access over the past couple of years, so it's we do not have I would say, wide scale, we're trying to enter anything.
Are they withdrawing access because they're not being compensated, or are they withdrawing access because somebody has used their land in a way that they don't like they messed something up?
Yeah, it's a great question. In many cases, I think they're connected. So there's a myriad of sort of different instances. Some are there, they had a visitor who told them they shouldn't be riding a horse on their own trail. And this was a landowner that wasn't equestrian, and they said, you know what? There's nothing keeping me in here, so I'm just gonna pull my trails out of the public. They have no stickiness to keep them in. So in some cases, it's been user behavior, and we work extremely hard to message a user ethic. In other cases, it's been turnover, and a new landowner comes in and says, well, I've moved here from wherever, and I'm not accustomed to this Vermont ethic of shared use. And they just say, I'm not interested in renewing this agreement or.
Cause I guess I wouldn't wanna have a study committee that contemplates throwing money at a problem that's not actually a problem that money will solve.
That's a great
You
point.
know, it just, we don't have a lot of money right now,
Mhm.
and we certainly don't have a lot of money for something to solve a problem that's not a problem.
Sure.
So I'm not sure I've heard anything convincing that this is a problem to solve, especially one with money.
Yeah, I think part of the bill would focus on what are the motivations driving the others to understand that. We know that there is risk, we know that communities like Burke have seen significant economic impacts of the loss.
So how come your organization that has a zillion members to it hasn't done this work yet? Why are you coming to us to ask us to solve a problem that you haven't identified yet?
Okay, the solution of what we're looking is to understand, should recreation be recognized like agriculture or forestry, conservation, other mechanisms for alternatives to development for land? Should it be considered in that group set? It's well outside the purview of the Trails and Greenways Council. We do work closely with ANR, but are not a public body, so we couldn't create that form of public recognition. So it's one that we want to understand if and how this should be pursued, and we're trying to come to the table with that desire to provide the legislature the information they would need to make that decision versus coming with this is step one of do we want to proceed.
I also just want to check, because I'm not looking at your presentation. Do you have more slides you want to?
I think you touched on a lot, but I mean, I talked through, and I think you perhaps already heard from council this morning about the different pieces of the bill itself. So I don't necessarily need to walk through those again, but I think as Senator Williams put it, this is very much a study aiming at understanding what is the current cost, what are the motivations for landowners to provide public access, what's the economic value for any kind of a program, and then to develop options or potential paths forward that landowners might be recognized. So very much aimed at providing us the information to make an informed decision. The only notes I wanted to highlight, it's a very balanced committee that would participate here in terms of providing input. And again, you probably heard about the basics from the bill earlier this morning. So I think the only thing else I might just kind of at least wrap on that, you could welcome additional questions. I mean, the why this bill and why now? I think folks hopefully understand that trail-based recreation is vital for Vermont's economic, social, physical health. We've seen increasing use over the past decade, and that's putting an enormous strain on our public outdoor recreation system, which is largely dependent on private landowners. Again, landowners receive no recognition or other reward for hosting public access trails on their land. And S79 would provide vital information to understand if and how we proceed with any kind of formal program to recognize those landowners. So I think that's that at least sort of wrapping up our summary of the bill. I mean, I think the other piece is that there's a cost to this bill. And I think that $250,000 cost is a very small down payment, like $2.1 billion economic impact for the state of Vermont.
Okay, any other questions? Great. Yes.
Just a point, I'll give you an example, I got some timberland. And I was up there marking some boundary lines and saw a couple of people that I know that are associated with the local, trail network, right, on my right of way. Just stopped and said, hey, I know what's going on. No, just checking out trails. A lot of that, I found out that my right of way, which I actually have a deed to, was in the ancient town road. So a lot of those ancient town roads are still in existence. And as you go through your surveys, you find out that they're there. A lot of people just kind of forgot it was there. So, yeah, so I think that's just another aspect of what you're trying to do is open up access from one town. It actually used to be an old stage road on my property, so. Yeah, interesting.
Just one follow-up question. So thinking about land that is already in current use, I mean, do you have a sense of, and maybe this is something that the study could get at, but if there is land that is already in current use that has trails on it, I mean, do you have a sense of like how much overlap there is?
It's a great question. I think that's, as you noted, that's something to say about the stats, which what is that current overlap? Is there any kind of an adder or other mechanism? Should it be distinct from current use? There's still value in saying landowners that have the current use to be encouraged or incentivized, subject to otherwise routine and public access. So it's something we want to look at and understand overlap there, and then think through, oh, is that land already protected? Does it not need any benefit, or is this be specific to lands that aren't already in some kind of a use value appraisal or other system to be recognized? So very much something that Bill would want to tease apart as well.
Yes,
And I think it's worth, it may be worth thinking about as it relates to the current use program. Whether this would be considered consistent with some forest management plans, but whether there's some conflict there, and if so, might want to give us an opportunity to think about whether it would be appropriate to add language saying that the addition of trails and certain surfaces would be considered consistent with. But we have to think sort of, there's something in there that we should probably think about.
And that's a great question, and also something, again, if you have Abby's another great person to speak to on this from King Trails, because they have, you know, of their nearly 100 private landowners, they have many parcels that are either in current use or have active forest management going on, and a lot of experience, and we can see within FIMBA of working to work within forest management. And so it's absolutely something that can work together, but it's important too, because if not, you can imagine there could be.
another question.
So have you noticed an increase in posting of property? Because
Yes. And the posting, so part of this bill too, there's trail-based recreation, there's also dispersed recreation, both of which are important for folks that hunt or fish. And the posting is less of a direct concern for trails, because trails we have the information to construct. But if you're gonna, for folks accustomed to hunting or these dispersed recreations, then there's definitely an increase in terms of posted land that no longer allows them.
so the reason I was bringing up my previous comment up is that my neighbor, who also shares this right is not interested in people on his trail. So I said, well, it's common right away. You know, so if I decide that I want people to use my property, my right of way, and you don't, so there's a potential conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point, whether is that understanding, and we have over 500 miles of legal trails in Vermont, so things that were ancient roads that technically are public access, but we've seen many cases where those are now posted, where there's some near where I live where people are posting for either even class 4 roads, where you have to remind them that this is not, this isn't public thoroughfare.
His point, well, back to me was, well, try to run up there and post my property. Well, you know, we've been land, you know, property neighbors for 25 years and nobody has posted, so. And I kind of like it that way, just if we can keep it all shared, people use it. It's one way. Well, necessarily, it's okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate the time.